I am with the author James Twyman, the author of I Don't Know, Maybe I Love You. And James, this book came out last Tuesday, and we're like I was telling you, we're sitting behind the dashboard watching people buy this book. They're buying 20 copies, they're buying 30 copies a day, 40 copies a day, And it's really exciting to see how quickly this book is taking off. And you're one of those people, like if I had a title for this interview, it would be Don't Try This at Home. I would say, don't try this at home, because I'm one of these people who firmly believes that it takes planning to write a strategic book, and it generally takes time. And you and I had a conversation, and you're like, yeah, I could write this book that you and I are talking about in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
And I was like, I don't know. I'd have to see it to believe it. And within 3 or 4 days, you had sent me like 3 chapters. And I read these 3 chapters and I thought, wow, this is a topic that is so current and it's so relevant, and the writing is so good, and you know how to tell a story, and you know how to drive points home and make an argument. So all of a sudden, my whole paradigm kind of came crashing down as to what you could accomplish in a very short period of time. And I would say don't try this at home, but you would be saying absolutely try this at home.
I would. Yeah.
Why?
Well, to back up first, I'm remembering that dinner that your husband Walt and I and you uh, shared. And if I remember correctly, I had just learned that you own this wonderful publishing company. We got into a conversation about publishing, and I said something like, I've written 23 books. I have no intention of writing any more books, but if I were to write another book, this is what I would write. And I told you the concept behind, I don't know, maybe I love you. And you immediately said, if you write that book, I will publish it. And you also said, in response to me saying, "Oh, I could write it very quickly. I think in a month or two I could have it." You just could not believe that. And I was living in my van down the road from you because I was on a concert tour. And I think I sat down that first night and wrote 4,000 words. And one of the things that I really believe, like you said, don't try this at home. I would say, yeah, try this at home. Try chasing it down the street. This is an article that I just wrote for you, actually. What tends to happen is people have an inspiration, and then they think, okay, now I need to plan. I need to figure it all out. And then hopefully they then get to the manifestation part. But what usually happens is they get the inspiration, they begin the planning stage, and many things will interrupt at that point. They'll have their own issues come up, their worries, their concerns about their own ability, whatever it might be. They just over plan and they never actually move into the manifestation. So the thing I would say to people to try at home is the next time you have a great inspiration, you just feel something inside you, something is excited within you, just start. Chase it down. Do one thing that that initiates that vision. It may be making a phone call. It may be starting to write a book. It could be anything, but start. Because here's the thing, even if you do plan, it's never going to go the way you plan. It never does. You're still going to have to adjust. You're still going to have to find ways to change your strategy based on what's happening in the moment. So make steps, and there's always some planning involved, but as quickly as possible, move to the point where you're activating. you're manifesting whatever it is you were inspired, and then chase it down the street. Adjust as you go, change things as you need to change things. What happens is a momentum begins to build. And it really, creativity is all about momentum. That
Mm.
planning stage is very little momentum involved in that. But if you can get the wheels of the bus turning, and then get in front of that steering wheel and just take it where it goes, you're going to probably be very surprised that it's going to end up being much more impactful, much more fun, and probably is going to change people's lives a lot quicker than if you planned it all out and tried to pull it in a little box, because it never really happens that way anyway.
Yeah, you do not fit in a box in any way, shape, or form, which is fascinating. So you're a creative. You could write any number of books, today or tomorrow. Why were you so compelled to write this book right now?
Because it's so needed right now. Simply, the story of, and this is, I think, the story I probably told you at the dinner table that night, of the title, I Don't Know, Maybe I Love You, was a conversation that I had with my younger brother during COVID. I don't remember exactly what we were arguing about, something to do with the pandemic. And Kenny has a very different approach, different beliefs, different ideology. We love each other very much, but we like to argue. And I realized he was winning. So I said, Kenny, I don't know. Maybe I love you, man. And he said to me later, I hate when you say that. How can I keep the argument going when you say that? And I realized in that moment, yeah, you're right. How do you keep the argument going when someone says, first of all, I don't necessarily know what needs to happen here. I have my opinion, just like everybody else has their opinion, but none of us know for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something I can learn from you. Maybe there's some information that you have from me that's going to help me see things from a different angle. But I do know that love has to be the foundation. There, there are too many people who are pushing family members, friends, colleagues out of their lives because they think they're right about everything. What I say in this book is that the real problem is the pandemic of being right. I'm right, and if you don't agree with me, that means you're wrong. And with the temperature so high today, that means I immediately have the right to push you out of my life. Doesn't matter who you are. It could be my best friend, my brother, sister, father. I can push you out of my life because you don't agree with me. And this book says you don't have to agree with each other, but you can listen to each other. You can be curious. You can go a little bit deeper and realize that there may be something new that comes to you that wouldn't have come if you had held so firm to your own belief system.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, maybe the audience knows this already. They may be familiar with you or they might not be familiar with you, but you have a really big following in what I would call the spiritual world. You've got a New York Times bestseller, The Moses Code, that, when I talk to strangers, they know that book. They know the book, they've seen the documentary that you created. And when you and I were talking about that idea, because I tend to publish in the secular world, people who are operating businesses or psychologists in the service industry, self-help and whatnot. And I saw such a huge need in, let me call it the secular world, for this book, because I'm seeing the other books out there too, talking about how disposable relationships are and how in this digital age we've become so polarized and the algorithms are keeping us connected to only people with our ideas, and they're encouraging discord and fights, and that gets rewarded in views and in feeling connected or feeling like you've got a position that you're willing to die for. And I think that it's this book is such a brilliant bridge between how to have faith and how to have a sense of connection and how to operate in the world in a loving fashion, and how to be good people and run businesses and run families without splintering apart. So I see the beauty of this book across genres, across target markets. It doesn't matter what kind of book I'm reading. It's like, oof, it's exactly what James is talking about in this book. It's, yeah, we've got that problem. Did you expect this to be a book simply for the huge audience that you've built in the more spiritual world, or could you too see how this plays out in corporations and in businesses and in even how a psychologist is, helping the people that come to the psychologist's office looking for ways to solve problems?
No, I'm absolutely with you. I think that this is primarily a secular book. Whatever that means, it
Yeah.
means that it applies to all of us. In fact, the most secular thing I could possibly say is there's nothing in this book that we didn't learn when we were in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. These are all just common things that we've always been taught. Things like be kind to one another. What happened to kindness? What happened to common courtesy? We were taught very young, just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean that you have to dislike or hate them or push them out of your life. We can still listen, we can still be curious. And curiosity, I think, is one of the main things I talk about in this book. What would happen instead if you say something that I disagree with, or you supported someone that I did not support? What would happen if instead of saying you're a bad person, I said, tell me more about that? Why did you feel that, or what did you hear that maybe I didn't hear? You're gonna share your opinion, and something opens rather than something closes, right?
Mhm.
And that's, I think, the most important secular message we can all hear today is how do we stay open to one another? I mean, we can talk about love and all of this stuff and all this lovely spiritual stuff too, but it's really more concrete than that. I really believe, I'm not necessarily saying that this book is going to save the world, but I think that the attitudes behind this book are what are going to bring it back together. That's why the subtitle is How to Depolarize Your Family, Business, Country, and the World. And that's what we're really trying to do, is to start a movement of people who are committed to be depolarizing agents. Imagine if we had thousands or even millions of people who said, I am committed to helping people depolarize. It would fall apart. The whole problem would just be solved.
So
And
here's the question. Here's the question that I see all the objections, right? I'll be talking about this book, and people who haven't read it will raise the objections. And one of the objections is, if I followed this approach to people who share completely different, intolerable opinions, how am I not a sellout? If I were to join this movement, as opposed to demonstrating in the streets, for instance, and shouting against what I don't like that's taking place in our current environment in the United States, how is being part of this mission not somehow negating those attentions and that energy that they're putting into those
mm,
demonstrations, or those, or they're, or what they're talking about out there on the streets or in social media? How is it not a conflict of interest?
yeah, good question. The first thing I would ask is, has all of that everything you mentioned, has it worked, or has it pushed us further apart? I would say it's pushed us further apart. It hasn't brought us closer together. So the first step that we have to accomplish is to bring us closer together. I think we can all agree that there's a lot more in the middle than there are in the extremes. We need to activate the people who have a reasonable consciousness, are able to listen, and if we can empower the middle, with people on the left, right, but somewhere near the middle, and we can begin to share our common interest, our common goals. I think we can make much more progress than pushing against the system. Once again, that it doesn't really work because all it does is push us. It makes us more polarized. And it's a good point, though. I understand what you're saying. And one of the things that I believe and I talk about a lot, because as you know, I am an Episcopal priest. So I do come at this from a more of a Christian or spiritual perspective. And one of the things that I'm saying to people, number one, is you're not a Republican and you're not a Democrat. If you claim that you are a Christian, I mean, you can claim to be anything, but if you make that claim, then be that. Be someone who is trying to love your enemies and do good to those who hate you and bless those who curse you. You can't say that you are something, but do the opposite of what that thing preaches, right? You can't say that you're Christian, but then do the opposite of what Christ calls us to do. Now, I could say that about any other religion or spiritual path. That's just one that I recognize the most. But the most important thing is we have to have the desire and the longing to solve the problem rather than to continue to pour fire onto the problem, or gasoline rather onto the fire, and make it even worse. We need to be the ones who take those steps to bring it back together. And unfortunately, I don't think the protesting, the all of the other things that are happening, I don't think that they're accomplishing the goal that people are hoping that it will accomplish.
Mm, I'd have to agree with you. And, the days are young, and this is, I don't know, probably the second big hit to our society lately that is causing splintering and division, and it seems to be going global. Has there been any reaction to your messaging, to this book, to the things that you're saying about this book that have surprised you?
Let me think about that for a moment. It's still early, so I'm not hearing a lot of feedback. The feedback that I have heard has been very positive. However, we've been preaching to the choir. So I think a lot of the people who are already reading the book are people who resonate with my message, and are already aligned with this. But even in the book itself, I I write about someone, actually a colleague who brought up the same point that you brought up. If someone says something to me that I know is wrong, am I contributing to that wrong by not saying anything to them about it? Well, in some ways, yeah. But the question is, how do I say something about it? Do I say, you're wrong, you shouldn't think about that? Or do I, which closes things, tightens, or do I take a different approach, which opens? I can do the same thing. I can question and bring about some kind of a curious opportunity without making that person bad and wrong. Unfortunately, today, if you tell me I voted for this person or I voted for that person, if I didn't vote for that person, I'm going to immediately say, you're out of my life. I
Yes.
can't even talk to you because you voted for that person. That's never happened before in history. Obviously things are very dramatic right now, so it's understandable. But there has to be there has to be a group of people who say, I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to try to open up the discussion rather than close it down. Because closing it down, we can't hear each other. And if we can't hear each other or listen to each other, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, there's no longer diplomacy. The only thing at our hand is war.
Hmm.
Without diplomacy, it's straight to the battlefield, and I think people are frightened of that possibility. So I like just having worked this project with you. It has totally opened up my mind, and I see my own prejudices, and I see where I will dig my heels in, and you know I don't know, moral superiority is something I anytime I have a chance to, grab hold of it, I love to be morally superior. And, I look at those places where I'm susceptible to that. And it does give me pause. And even if the outcome of reading this book is to take a pause when you see yourself wanting to react or to lash out or to cut people off or to just bail, I think it's so worth the read. Um, you've published and written independently. You've worked with other publishing houses. Is there anything about our experience that you would comment on, or that surprised you, or that worked really well for you?
I
What
would
was
say
what was
this
huh?
right now, this moment, uh, having a friend, a colleague who is interested and is going to work with me to find the real juice in this subject. You're right. I've worked with big New York publishers. I've worked with small boutique publishers, medium. I've published several books just on my own. And quite honestly, this has been the most satisfying experience that I've ever had, working with someone as intimately as you and I have worked together on this. I think has inspired me to take this to a higher level than I would have otherwise. Um, Obviously, the publishing business has changed so much and will continue to change. I wrote my first book back in 1995, and back then, if you had a great subject, if you could write, and a publisher felt that your message and your work was worthy, even if no one knew you, they would take a chance. That doesn't happen anymore. You could write the great New York, you could write the great American novel, and if you don't have X number of people on your social media or your email list or whatever, publishers aren't going to talk to you. It's a different world, and yet at the same time, there's so many opportunities, so many visions, so many um, projects that are worthy that someone like you, when I first told you about this, I saw you catch the fire. And that's what inspired me to write it. Because I had no intention of writing this book. But because I could see you caught it, that's what inspired me. And I think that's the value of working with someone like you on this project.
I love that. I think that if I could clone you, or if I could like squeeze the essence of James Twyman into a bottle and give it to other people, the essence of it is your willingness to bet on yourself and to bet on an idea. And I've seen you take the idea and run with it and then finish it, right? And then look for all of the possible ways to get it out there in the market, to spread the word, because us writers, we like to think of ourselves as just sitting down and writing it. But the way you think about a book is so much bigger than the writing of it. The writing seems to come with ease for you. You're a beautiful storyteller. You handle language brilliantly and efficiently. But you're a very, very big thinker. And you take action, and you'll also stop yourself when you spot that it's not going to take off the way you expected it to take off. So you don't do things blindly, but what is that you do? And I'm referring specifically for people who obviously don't have, the insider information, is James will start in on another book, something related to this, and then we'll carry it through a couple of chapters and decide, yeah, it's not the right time, it's not the right thing. So it's not like you blindly take off and do things out of habit or do things out of, you must do this next. what is that? Like, how do you describe what it is that you do? Because I think that book success, publishing success, business success, life success could just skyrocket with this thing that you do or this way that you see the world. Do you know what I'm referring to? Because I'm
Yeah.
not very eloquent.
Yeah, I think it's the old throw it against the wall and see if it sticks idea. I have a lot of ideas. The creativity is, I think, my addiction. I love to create, and I get ideas, and not all of them turn into bonfires, but now and then an idea will really spark, and yet I don't know for sure if it's the right time, but I don't question it. And maybe this is the main answer. I don't try and figure it out. I start, like we were talking before about chasing it down the street. I start, I begin writing, I begin talking to people, whatever it may be, and see how it feels. I tune in and say, well, what is this feeling like now? Uh, and we were talking about taking this message and applying it more to a business strategy and working with corporations. And I wrote a few chapters and then fell. In fact, I think I wrote an entire draft and then went back to revise it. Uh, but I didn't feel like when I set that aside, I didn't feel like I had made a mistake. You don't question it like that. It was more like, okay, that brought me to another place, maybe for this. Maybe it informed something for when this book comes out. And maybe I'll go back to that later. I don't know. But I think it really does come down to having courage, being curious, and being willing to step out onto that plank and just trust that it's going to hold your weight.
All right, crazy question. Are you ever afraid?
No, I don't think I get afraid. I do, um, sometimes I get cautious uh, and maybe ask, question myself, but I don't think I spend a lot of time going to war zones and doing peace concerts and things like that. And even in situations like that, I can apply this, what we're talking about. There have been quite a few times when I'll be invited to say, go to a country that's experiencing some great conflict or at war, and I'll say yes, and I'll start to move toward that. But if things begin to shift and the signs that I receive say no, I let it go. And it's not that I made a mistake or should or shouldn't have done anything. And there have been many other times when I did go. I've followed all the way through. There have been probably way more projects or books that I've started writing that I never finished than the books that I have finished. I mean, I've written 24 books. There are probably 25 of them that I started and never finished. Uh, and that's okay. We don't have to uh, we have to follow the signs as they come. And if I lay aside one project, it doesn't mean that that project failed. It means that it's going to inform something else. So no, I'm not afraid. I think I try to have that courage and stay curious so that I can just follow things through.
I love that. So if you were to talk to somebody who's sitting on a manuscript and contemplating whether or not to publish it, um, or sitting on an idea and wondering if they should, take the leap and work with somebody, as a content developer, or even to do the project on their own, what would you say to that person to encourage them to take the next step or to ask better questions to suss out whether or not it is the right time or the right book?
hmm I would say start writing. Just start and see where it takes you. It might take you, you might write one chapter and say, okay, The energy has dissipated. I don't need to continue this. Or things have shifted in a new direction. I'll follow that direction. Let go of the idea of failure or success. Just because you start something and don't finish it doesn't mean that you failed. Or even if you write something and publish a book and it doesn't live up to your expectations, that doesn't mean that it failed. I remember in the very, very beginning, of course, new writers often say this. I would say, if this touches and changes the life of one person, it will have been worth it. And yeah, that's true in a very real way. But if it's only one person, that doesn't mean that you failed. Very few people sell millions of books. That's a rare, rare thing. But if you can sell a few hundred books that change the trajectory of people's lives and maybe even the entire world, that's a great success. So that's my advice: is start writing, start chasing it down the street, see where it takes you, follow the guidance, and always remember that there is no failure in this. There is just uh, higher and higher levels of success to achieve, whatever that looks like.
All right, so you see why I want to bottle you, right? Right. So tell people who are listening where they can find your book and what you'd like them to do.
Well, of course, you can find the book on Amazon or any of the other platforms. You can also, if you want to get involved in this movement, what I would suggest is go to which is de-polarize.com, de-polarize.com. And you can always click the link and get the book there. You can sign up for the email list and get part of this movement. Activate this in your own life so that your yes, whatever that looks like, takes root and starts to move in a direction that uh, you may not be able to understand that direction. It may not make any sense in the beginning, but I promise you, if you just keep following the yeses along the way, like breadcrumbs, they're going to lead you to somewhere that you couldn't even imagine right now. It doesn't matter if your book ends up being a million seller or sells 150 copies. It's going to be something that could change your life, and in changing your life, it very well might change the whole world.